Hey everyone, I swear this is take one. I am Peter, that is Tim, and we talk about horror movies on this show. And on this episode, we are going to be discussing the zombie classic Dawn of the Dead from 1978. Of course, this is a continuation of sorts of one of last week's episodes. We talked about Night of the Living Dead because George A. Romero passed away the previous weekend to that. And we decided we were going to work through the entire trilogy. So Day is coming sometime next week. You can look forward to that. So this is Dawn. We had a good time talking about Night, and now we're, I was going to say Dead there. I was going to say, we had a good time talking about Dead. Night. A good time about Night. But so we're talking about Dawn, which of course is the famous one that takes place almost entirely. No, there's quite a lot of setup. There was more setup getting to the mall than I remembered, but it takes place in a shopping mall. That's the main setting of the movie, and we've got four main characters. And they shit's kind of going down. The zombie apocalypse is really starting to look like it's kind of no turning back. And they decide to race off to the shop. Well, they're just sort of going in search of anything. They don't really know where they're going, but they come across this shopping mall. They end up deciding to stay there and clear it out and sort of make it a home. And that's kind of the movie. That's what it is. So I'm just going to give you a spoiler warning right here, right now. If you haven't seen Dawn of the Dead, see Dawn of the Dead. You should see it. If you're a horror fan and you haven't seen the original Dawn of the Dead, just go see it.
And if a horror fan, zombie fan, even if you don't like zombies, I would say this is like essential horror viewing.
It's because much like Night, there's a lot of social commentary going on. There's a lot of subtext to the film itself. Just actually, although one point I want to make here actually, just as we're talking about, because right now what we are saying to people is, if you've not seen this, go see it. You filthy casuals. That's essentially what our message is right now. I will admit there's a caveat in that message.
Oh?
There is a caveat. It might actually be quite difficult for you to go and see this right now, because currently it's not available for rental, like streaming-wise anywhere, on video on demand. It's not in print on Blu-ray or DVD or any formats. Now, you can obviously find it used in places, and depending on the format, you might get it at a decent price. And obviously, I've got the Blu-ray that came out like 10 years ago now, and that's how I was watching it. But Dawn of the Dead right now is, despite being this classic film that everyone knows about, you can't actually acquire it. It's not in print.
Yeah, it's really strange. I was, once Romero passed away, it's very unfortunate. And then, one of the first things you want to do is kind of, watch his movies. And I have Night and Dawn on DVD, and I was kind of like, I think it's about time I upgraded these to Blu-ray. But they're both kind of hard to find. Night I don't think is impossible, but it's
Night had a 4K restoration recently. I believe it's finally coming out soon to theaters.
Oh, okay.
So that probably should pop up soon after. In fact, Janus Films, who did it, typically have their movies go to Criterion. So there's a very reasonable chance that Night will get a Criterion.
Hold on that,
sometime maybe next year or something like that. But Dawn's a different case though, because I actually just found out this recently. I couldn't tell you the name of the guy, but the producer, whoever owns the rights to Dawn, because I think it's also Martin as well. I think Martin's also tied up in this. The producer of Dawn. The reason why there's no versions of it is basically because the guy who owns the rights is asking for so much money to license it out that no one's willing to pay for it, and that's why there's no way to get a new copy of it right now.
Man,
so
that stuff really annoys me.
It's purely greed, especially when you think about how there's no other classics like that are tied up in that sense. Like you can at least rent them on Amazon or iTunes or something like that. They're not.
I wonder how much he's asking for, because even if he didn't ask for a lot, he'd probably still make a ton of money, because if he's getting like a a percentage or something of, I don't know if he gets like a small take of stuff that's sold or
sold possibly, but I don't. Streaming definitely doesn't work that way. It's just a flat fee. You pay to get it for like a year, say. Like Netflix will pay the movie studio, or will pay you X thousands or X millions for this movie for 1 year or 2 years, whatever the contract is, and then they've got it for a year in the service. That's how that works. There's no per viewing like income.
Yeah. Well, it's like whatever he's doing though, you're obviously not making any money by not doing it. Like, I understand it. if he's greedy or whatever, he wants some money, fine. But after a while, you got to be like, hey, don't you at least want something instead of nothing?
You would think so. It's really strange. I don't. I mean, I only know this from like secondhand information. I have no great insight to what's going on.
Yeah.
That's what I heard. I heard that whoever owns the rights to Dawn is being stingy with giving them out, and as a result, there's no current version. Because it was with Anchor Bay for years. Anchor Bay put out a few versions of it on DVD, and then the early Blu-ray was also Anchor Bay.
Yeah. I gotta say, I do really like the DVD I got. I got the big like 4-disc one, and it looks really nice. But obviously you want the Blu-ray. You want
It's
the best you can get.
2017, so now it's like times went on. I had that 4-disc DVD actually back when, and I got the Blu-ray, so I just replaced it mainly because the extras I cared about were also still in the Blu-ray. It didn't have the alternate cuts, but honestly, like, because I mean, she's explaining this just off the bat, so we'll explain the different cuts as I'm talking about this. But so there's the extended cut, which is not a director's cut. This is something that I remember Romero talking about in the commentaries or whatever. Is the extended cut has some extra stuff in it, and it's fine. Like he's not against people watching that version, but it's not like the one he released in theaters is the one that he, that was his version.
Yeah. See, I actually watched the extended cut, and I could kind of feel
Pacing.
definitely.
It's already a pretty long movie for a horror movie. It's like 2 hours and 7 minutes. So it's for a horror movie that's quite lengthy already.
Yeah, and I feel like it seemed kind of unnecessary. Like when I watched it, I don't know the movie scene by scene or anything, but there wasn't really anything that stood out to me as being like, oh my god, this crazy new scene that wasn't in the original version.
I imagine it's. I don't know if I think I did watch the extended cut when I had that DVD, but I think I maybe only watched the commentary track that was on that version. So I don't really remember it, but I feel like it was mostly probably just extra stuff with them like faffing around in the mall and.
I feel like there had to have been a good portion of it maybe in the beginning, because
possibly.
I think the beginning is like it does always surprise me how long it takes them to get to the mall. But
it's funny actually because I checked the time. See when you first see the mall and they're in the helicopter. I checked the time. What was that? It was at 27 minutes on the theatrical cut. Which is fine. Like, I actually don't have a problem with that. It's just. I think your mind and in your head when you think back to it, you think of it being really quick to get to the mall, and then the whole movie's in the mall. But when you actually watch it now, it's like, oh no, it actually takes a little bit of time to get there.
And I, like you, I don't really have a problem with the beginning. I still enjoy that stuff, but it does. You do always go like, oh wow, this is longer than I expected.
And then the third cut of the film, which was in that box set, is the Italian cut. Now, obviously, this is quite prominent because in Italy it was called Zombie, without the E, just Zombie with the I, and that is why we have Zombie 2, which is technically a sequel to the Italian version of Dawn of the Dead, directed by Lucio Fulci, which we've not done in this show, but we will at some point, I promise you that. But that one's notable because it has a different, it was re-edited completely. Was it Argento who edited it? It may have been.
I think so. I know he was involved in the movie somehow.
He was involved.
I forget.
He definitely produced the Italian version of it. I don't know if he was the one actually making the choices with the cut, but it also had a different score. It was just the other notable thing. So I remember checking that one out when I had the DVD just because I wanted to hear the different music, because I was curious.
I watched that at some point. It's been way too long now, but I remember checking all of those out. And then it's a pretty good box set. They have those versions, and then they do have quite a good number of special features. Which I always want to watch more special features, but I feel like I never have time. But this was one that when I was kind of looking at, I was like, I should probably sit down and watch these again. It's especially.
I think for me it always comes down to I like extras. I like commentary tracks, and I like meaty making of documentaries, but often it'll come down to, well, do I want to watch the commentary on this movie or just watch another movie I've not seen yet? And usually it kind of.
I feel like that's a big problem within like the last maybe. I don't know, maybe like 6-7 years or so, where there's so much stuff that's available now, and there's so much streaming stuff where I used to like rewatch movies all the time, and watch special features and
It
stuff.
is.
And
Do you know what it is? It's because you had like, I mean, even if you had a lot of movies on like DVD, I'm not going to say Blu-ray specifically because that's kind of verging into streaming sort of time period. But like you'd have like, even if you had like 500 movies, you know, you wouldn't necessarily have new ones to watch until you bought some more. So you might you might go back and look at some extras. You might go back and rewatch stuff more often than you do now. Whereas now it's like, I can just spend a couple of dollars on Amazon and rent a new movie that I've not seen.
yeah. And then I always have the problem where I feel like I'm missing out. Like, oh, if I'm watching this thing I've already seen, then I could be missing a really great new movie that, is just got released on Shudder or Netflix or something.
It's all about balance, Tim. You just have to balance yourself, and obviously, every so often you get the itch. You want to go back and revisit something. The one good thing about this now is not rewatching stuff as often. Is that I find that if 5 years passes between watches, that it is actually really exciting to go back and watch it, because I'll remember the gist of the movie. I'll remember the core plot is and the core ideas, but I'll have forgotten just so many little moments that it'll actually be this weird, almost nostalgia thing where as they happen, I remember them and I'll be like, oh, that bit and that bit. And so,
Definitely.
But yeah, so that was a tangent on the releases. But yeah, so it's actually hard to get a hold of now. You can get obviously used copies, but otherwise it's quite difficult. That said, it's worth hunting if you keep your eye out if you've not seen the movie. But Dawn of the Dead.
Definitely.
So let's get into it, I guess.
Sure.
So I would say, movies set in a shopping mall, and much like the first movie was definitely had social commentary with some Vietnam, racial tension, all those kind of things. This one, there's still some of those elements in here, but it definitely shifts to a different message where it's more about consumerism and capitalism and kind of basically people not paying attention to the actual problems that are going on and distracting themselves with those kinds of things, distracting themselves with frivolous, physical products and so on.
I feel like you get a little. I feel like the consumerism is probably the main social commentary. Again, though, talking about the beginning, I always kind of forget that stuff, though. I feel like there's a lot you can really glean from that, though. Like, it's like, you can kind of get like some police brutality stuff, like some like economic stuff.
Yeah, there's definitely some other stuff mixed in there, certainly towards the start. I think, because obviously you have the scenes, we open with the Francine, who's our one of our main four characters. She works at this TV station, and they're doing news, and they're putting out all these emergency bulletins and all these various things, and stuff's like people are starting to leave their job and just leave because they're like, what's the point anymore? Like the world's ending, and that sets up that society's breaking down. And then again with this like SWAT team where Peter and what's his name, Roger, come from, like our two of our other main characters. They like go in, and there's this hothead who's basically just losing his mind and starts like killing people. He blows one guy's head off with a shotgun. It's like one of these big effects moments, and he's just completely losing his mind to the point where the other cops have to put him down. And then another cop like commits suicide because he realizes there's so much going on, and it was kind of like it's society again, much like the first movie was ultimately other human beings are what causes the demise of everything. It's kind of the same in this, where even at the end of the movie, it's the other human beings that are alive, the bikers, that come in and actually destroy everything. So, it's human beings, again, that are the actual real enemy of the movie.
You know what this beginning kind of feels like to me? Like, the beginning feels very much like it's still Night of the Living Dead. And then, like, once they get to the mall, like, to me, it feels like that's almost when, like, all right, Dawn of the Dead is starting now. Like, it seems like it's like this little, like, bridge gap between the two movies.
Yeah, I can kind of see that. It is, I mean, partly because it's set at night at the start, and then we go. I mean, admittedly, it goes through day and night before we get to the mall, but you have them leaving at night in the helicopter, and it ends up being those four characters: Francine with her boyfriend, Stephen, and then you've got Roger and Peter from the spot, and they leave, and there's some great little things in here about consumerism. There's this other cop who's asked because he wants to smoke, and he's asking them if they've got any, and he and they all say no. And as soon as he leaves and they start flying off, they all light up. Like they all except from Peter. Peter's just kind of watching, and he sort of smirks like they all lied and kept stuff for themselves. And that's a big theme of this movie as well. I mean, that's part of the consumerism, obviously, but this idea of this selfish, no, I have mine. I'm not giving you any. I'm not helping you. And there's a real battle of humanity in the core of the movie, and the opening, like getting there, it's like is it just this? Because again, like you say, like it still kind of feels like night. There's a little montage where they fly over and we see like the hillbillies and stuff, like going through the woods, kind of like the end of Night of the Living Dead. And I don't think it picks up right away. And I mean, it's funny because I guess I kind of assume that Night, Dawn, and Day are all part of the same universe, but at the same time, they don't need to be. Like this could just be another universe with a zombie apocalypse going on, but it still kind of fits. Sure. So it's like. But does it feel like 10 years since Night? And does the movie even say it's 1978? I'm not sure if it does, but...
not to my knowledge.
That said, though, they go to the mall and there's like arcade games. I'm pretty sure those arcade machines weren't around in 1968.
Yeah.
So it's definitely present day when the movie came out. So I think all that's great. And one of my favorite little touches of this movie, from a character perspective, is that the characters who don't know each other right away definitely don't trust each other. You know, Stephen, aka Flyboy, which is what Peter calls him because he's the pilot of the helicopter. Him and Peter don't really get along right away. It's not until they get to the mall and stuff starts going down and he kind of saves him that they kind of finally start to loosen up and the tension goes away and they feel that they work together. But one of my favorite things about the characters, though, is that the two that die, Stephen and Roger, both of them die and it's their own fault. Both of them cause their own demise, which I think is another big theme of the movie, is that this is all happening and it's kind of our fault. This is our bad. We did this. Because they both did it to themselves. Roger, he starts getting cocky. He starts thinking, oh, we're invincible. We can do anything we want. We have this mall. We found this utopia. And he gets cocky to the point where he starts getting reckless, and that's what gets him bit. And ultimately leads to his death. And then likewise... Stephen, at the end of the movie when the bikers come in, you know, Tom Savini comes in with his glorious mustache, and they're like shooting the place up, they're killing zombies, and Stephen and Peter have a chance to just go and hide in their room, and they would none be the wiser. You know, they've built a fake wall so that no one knows their little hideaway is there, and Stephen doesn't make that choice. He actively says, "This is ours. We found this. We made this place," and then he starts a war. He actually starts shooting back at the people. He causes this chain of events that leads to his own death. That's his fault because he doesn't want to give up the physical stuff that he's built up.
Yeah, and it's kind of going back to what you were talking about earlier. How there's this kind of greediness aspect. This kind of like, oh, we gotta kind of hoard and preserve everything.
Possession. It's all about possessions.
And it's in reality, like, it's a pretty big biker gang, but still, it's not like that many people. Like, you're talking about an entire mall. Like, there's way more than enough stuff for everyone to have and share.
Absolutely, because that's the other thing as well. So because they find this utopia, and they make the choice not to leave. They see what this could be, because they could take what they want, and that's something that Francine, like early on, like she doesn't really want to stay as much as the other guys do, and she's like, no, we should fly, we should try and go to Canada, and she wants to keep looking, and they make the conscious choice, no, we're going to stay here, we're going to build this up, and we see them having their fun, and they try on different things, they're taking money out of the tills, and they're doing all this stuff, and there's all these montages once they actually clear out the zombies where they're just enjoying the luxury of the mall, and it's this commercialist dream. And don't get me wrong, the idea of being left alone in an empty mall that's fully stocked, like everything has all the stuff in it and you can do what you want, don't get me wrong, there is like a dreamlike mentality to that, and I think that's actually partly why this movie's so much fun, because even before you get to the subtext and what the movie's saying, it's just a fun idea.
Oh yeah, like it's a really great scene, and actually one of the kind of weirder things I like about zombie movies is, like, I like the practicality of it. Like, I like seeing people how they're going to like board stuff up, and I like all the stuff with them, blocking the exits, with the trucks and
all the strategy. I like the strategy element to it. Yeah, because even earlier on, because at first, because they get into this back room, this storage room, and it's like, hey, there's a lot of stuff down there. We could go down there and like get some stuff. They're slow, obviously, so we can run around them. It's very strategic. And that's how it starts. It's just Peter and Roger going down to get some supplies. And they get the keys and they get into this department store. And they start doing this very smart thing where they run downstairs, make a lot of noise, so all the zombies will go down to that entrance and they can go out the one they originally came in with their stuff. And they've got a wheelbarrow and they're being very strategic and try to work everything out. And it's all this... It's funny how much this movie kind of makes me realise why I like a lot of certain video games. And some of them are obvious. Obviously, you've got Resident Evil and stuff, which is inspired. Dead Rising, one of the things Dead Rising even had to put a disclaimer in its opening credits that it wasn't like anything to do with Dawn of the Dead, because it's like, it's a game with zombies in a shopping mall.
Yeah.
But one of the things I actually think that game recreates a lot, and I realised it as I was watching Dawn of the Dead this time round, is this idea of the safe room that you've got one entrance to that you have to keep going back to. Because that's in that game. You keep going back to that same like security room in that game, and it's kind of like here going back to this one stairwell. It's got this one little storage area, which over the course of the movie they sort of do up. Because by the time they get to the end of the movie, it's like a living room. They've got like a TV, they've got like nice sofas, and they've really made it homely. They've tried to keep a hold of the society that they had before. That's really what they're trying to claw and do the whole movie. Is they're trying to keep that, and ultimately it's not enough. Like, they all get depressed. They get kind of suicidal and unhappy, and it's not enough. And I think that's fascinating to me. That this wasn't enough. It's just a mirage of what life used to be. This wasn't the important stuff, was what the movie's ultimately saying. The important stuff was functioning and having each other and having a society. And then
and
good
what's funny is that they are doing like the same thing that the zombies are doing, because they mention like I think someone's like, oh, like, why are the zombies like coming here and stuff, and someone says like, oh, it must be like a part of their memories buried in their past, like they have this kind of like
which pays off fantastically at the end.
Yeah,
because when Steven turns into a zombie, he leads them to the secret entrance to where they are. It pays off wonderfully to set that up. It's really good.
Yeah, but yeah, just like in the same way the zombies are trying to find some familiarity by going to the mall, and kind of they have these ingrained routines in their head. The survivors are doing the same thing. They're trying to, like you said, like live comfortably and make like a nice little nest for themselves, like they're used to.
Yeah, it's and I think as well with the bikers, they're already so far gone where they are just wanting to pillage, and they're kind of the like the villains you expect in like a zombie apocalypse, the human villains.
Yeah,
where they're just doing whatever they want. And I think that's like a warning sign to the other characters that this is what we could become. This is maybe what, everyone's doing stuff for themselves rather than... And I think that's what makes the ending so effective with Peter, is he kind of gives up. He's like, he almost doesn't want to live if he can't have all these comforts that he had when when society was up and running. He wants his TV, he wants his sofa, he wants all these things, all these material possessions, and he almost gives up to keep them. Or not keep them, but give up because he can't have them. There's no point in living without them. And then there's that heroic moment where he says, no, life is still worth living. This isn't the important stuff. He learns what the movie's been kind of trying to teach us the whole time. And there's this ridiculous, I love it, but it's this ridiculous hero music starts playing as he starts kicking the zombies, and he's clawing his way up to get to the helicopter, which Francine's learned to pilot, and he gets in and he says, this is how the movie ends. And I know we're jumping around all sort of weird order here, but he says to her at the end, how much fuel have we got? It's like, not a lot. It's like, okay then. But, I think what the movie's saying there is, you keep fighting. You don't know how much you've got left. You don't know how long you've got left to live, but you keep fighting anyway. It's about survival. It's about living on, not knowing. But it's worth taking the chance. It's worth, I think the ending, given how depressing this potentially is, at the end where he almost commits suicide, I actually think the ending's got a really hopeful kind of message where it's like, no, you keep fighting because there's a chance that things could be okay.
Yeah, and I was looking at the Wikipedia entry for this, trying to see maybe if there was some like interesting facts or anything about it, and they did have a small section about an alternate ending, I guess, where...
I did hear about this actually, where he did commit suicide.
Yeah, actually both... It's kind of crazy because it's both Peter commits suicide by shooting himself, which... makes sense because he, surrounded by the zombies and stuff that coming at him. He has his gun. But then what I thought was really weird is that Francine also commits suicide by like just kind of like falling forward into the helicopter blades, like which seemed really strange, but I'm glad they didn't go with
I'm glad
that
as well,
ending.
especially since Night has such a depressing ending, and it's
Right.
very much the end of. I like the idea that here it's about no, we can learn and we can actually
Mm.
like better ourselves. Because, like I say, I think the movie's kind of implying the reason why all this even happened in the first place, and we don't really know where it came from because we're talking about a satellite in the first one, like
Yeah.
maybe it had something to do with it. But like, the idea that because we're so obsessed with all these things that don't matter, all these other bad things happen instead, and it's kind of often what you talk about even today, like stuff's happening in
Oh yeah.
Congress because people aren't really paying attention to it. And they just let it happen because they're not, they're not being vocal and whatever, and it's still kind of relevant. Much like the first movie, there's a lot of relevance in here in what's being said, even if
Yeah.
physical possessions are, not as big as they used to be because a lot of stuff is digital now. It doesn't apply to everything, obviously. You can't get a digital bed,
Yeah.
but
Yeah. But I mean, I think, and I even have this problem. I bet you can probably relate to it too. But like, even with digital stuff now, I find myself hoarding like,
oh yes,
digital comics, and
it's
hey,
the
maybe
sale. It's actually one of the first things you see in the mall when it cuts inside is you see like mannequins. They've got like sale tags on them. So it's a sale, and it's like, oh, it's a sale. Like, oh, we can splurge. And I think we're all guilty of it. And I don't think the movie's meant to make you feel bad that you do any of this. It's just
No.
it's like a warning to say, like, just keep your eye on things that are important as well. There's nothing wrong with enjoying these things because even the characters in the movie do enjoy it for a time. And it's
Yeah.
actually the turning point is it's after Roger dies and they have that romantic dinner, and Peter comes in and pours the champagne. He's like, no, this isn't for me. This is just you two. I'm not third wheel. You
Yeah.
two have your nice moment. And Stephen proposes, and that's kind of the turning point for me because she says no, and not because she doesn't love him, but because it wouldn't be the real thing because we couldn't actually go and get married like you would before, and that's almost kind of the realization I think for the characters that yeah, as much as we are doing this, it's not it's not real. Like she realizes it's all just kind of like dressing, and not it's ignoring the rest of the world and just being her own bubble instead of
Yeah.
actually dealing with the problems that are going on. So again,
And-
I like it. So much of it has weight behind it. There's so much subtext going on. It's good stuff.
And it's a good juxtaposition between the bikers at the end. Like, there's this great scene where one of them, kind of like picks up this like TV, and the other one's like, "What do you need that for?" And he's like, "Yeah, you're right." And he just throws it at another TV, and then like takes like a hammer and just like smashes it. And just like it's a nice scene of showing like, oh, like yeah, see the bad guys here, like they'll actually destroy stuff, if they don't need it, as opposed to, the people that, are preserving it and sharing it and,
Yeah.
using it amongst themselves.
There's obviously it's destructive in the obvious sense because he's destroying it, but it's just destructive behavior in the sense that you're not leaving anything behind for anyone else. You're just kind of using things up, and you're going to have leave nothing left for anyone. And so I mean, you could almost argue there's a very slight, but almost an environmental message in there about
Oh yeah.
just preserving the world as a whole, and if not society itself, then the planet before we all boil alive. I feel like I'm boiling. It's bloody warm. I hate summer.
So now, talking about the themes and everything's great, but I do want to move on to the zombies.
What if I have more themes, Tim? You're rushing me ahead here. I've got oodles of themes to talk about.
Oh well, please go if you have anything else you'd like to say.
No, I'm done.
Okay.
I'm sure I'll probably think of something later, but yeah, go on.
Yeah, we'll bounce around all over the place. But I did want to talk about the actual zombies. As I like that. Yeah, again, if we're going in real time, obviously this movie takes place like years after Night. But I like that the zombies almost like in Night of the Living Dead, they still look mostly like humans. Maybe like they're like a little messed up towards the end and stuff. And I like here that it doesn't feel like they're too far off. Like they're not fully decayed zombies, but you're starting to notice like they are getting a little more like blue in the face, and
some look better than others. I do actually. I mean, if I'm going to bring up a criticism, and I'm going to bring up one,
Mhm.
is that because I think with Night, the one criticism I could pick up, there was some weird edits. That was my one critique of Night.
Mhm.
With Dawn, my one critique is that some of the zombies and effects, like the makeup effects,
Mhm.
don't look that great. Like, in at least in the sense, like they look great in terms of function. Like, you know, the biting and things ripping off looks good,
Oh yeah,
but like the color of the blood and some of the like things and the blue paint on the faces, some of that is just a little bit off looking to me.
yeah. I wonder, I don't know if you know this off the top of your head, but was Giallo really established yet?
78, yeah, because Suspiria was before
Okay.
this. Suspiria was 77, I think.
Yeah.
So yeah,
I,
and that wasn't
wonder if
first,
that
but like that's like the big example everyone thinks of. So
yeah, because I wonder if like that plus like Argento's involvement and stuff. I wonder if that had any influence
yeah, the blood's
on it.
yeah, the blood reminds me of the sort of blood you'd see in those movies. Actually, that's a very good point. Even some of the music, even though the music was changed for the Italian release, some of the music in this already feels like it belongs in a
Yeah.
giallo movie. Some of which I like a lot, actually. It's got some good music.
Yeah.
But
And then yeah, and then mentioning earlier Tom Savini, obviously he's one of the bikers in this, but doing the special effects as well. And I don't know, I'm not sure if this is his first movie, but I
don't
do
know.
think like like you said, once it kind of starts to get towards like the final act and the zombies are really going crazy and you see them like ripping out people's intestines and just biting and tearing off skin, I think the special effects get really good at that
Yeah,
point.
oh yeah, and I agree that they're all better towards the end when things are just going complete chaos. It's the opening. It's just when the SWAT team are going around doing stuff. Like some of the zombies, I thought looked a bit
Yeah.
rough. The blood color never gets better though. That is one thing that's kind of sticks around for the whole thing. Is it just looks more like red paint than it does blood.
Yeah, I definitely get the criticism. It doesn't bother me that much, but I know it's noticeable for sure.
Yeah, it's not that like it doesn't ruin the movie for it. I think this is a masterpiece.
yeah.
Like I think of it that highly, and that'll be reflected when we get to scores. But I it's just every time I watch it, there's always that moment I first see some blood coming out of someone, and I'm like, oh yeah, I need to remember that the blood looks like this because it just doesn't look real. I guess is what I'm saying. But that's okay. That's okay. It's the everything else makes the movie. It's funny actually because in the cut there's always a cut in the middle because the recording software gets a little bit iffy if you go too much beyond 30 minutes. I happened to bring up Tom Savini's page just to see if it was his first makeup job. It wasn't. Interestingly, he had an uncredited special effects job on Dead of Night, but the first one after that was actually Martin.
Oh, okay.
He did the effects for Martin, and then it was Dawn of the Dead.
Nice.
So it's early in his career, but because all the other ones I could think of, which was Friday the 13th, for 4 specifically. I think I did the first one as well. Although he's not credited here for that. He must have a different credit. Maybe that's in the makeup department. He's credited for that. That probably makes some sense. Nah. Come on. This is the problem with this type of effects work. It's credited as so many different. There's so many different things, but hey ho.
I mean, needless to say, he's worked on a lot of great
he has,
horror movies.
He's obviously one of the key names when it comes to the practical like makeup gore effects in movies. So yeah, obviously we've talked about the themes, we've talked about the zombies and the subtext and all that stuff. And to a point, the characters, and one of the things I love is it, when you strip all that away, like I said, just the idea of the movie's fun, like the idea of the being this mall and the survival elements where they're thinking and strategizing about where to block things up. Can we empty them all out and have it for ourselves? Can we do all this stuff? And all that stuff is a lot of fun to watch. It's very I think the weird side effect that has though is the movie actually isn't that scary. It's not that creepy even, because it does take this completely different approach to it where it's more about, like I say, the strategy of survival. The creepy first instance of it was Night. Like that was the holy shit, the horror of this happening to us. Whereas this was more, okay, we need to try and survive now that we know this is a thing. The idea of these things being around is kind of normal now for these people. They understand, maybe not understand, but they expect them now. Even if obviously there's good tense scenes where there's people almost shooting each other and all sorts of things,
but I feel like it especially comes into play like towards the end when you like have like bikers like throwing pies in the zombie's face and the music gets like real goofy for a little bit.
Well, yeah, that was the other thing though, is that these bikers like treat all this as a joke. They don't take any of it seriously. And I think that's another sort of thing that adds into some of the commentary here, is that if you don't take anything seriously, like because all these bikers, most of them end up dying. Like this is just like this is part of the just the other people that come in and ruin everything. Actually, one of my points that I made earlier about Stephen making the choice to fight back when he didn't have to, and because he was being greedy and possessive of what he has, is that this was actually after the team already decided they're going to leave, because they end up having like this fight while they're having dinner about like turning the TV on and off, and she gets really pissed at him and she's like, what have we done? Like, we're here and we're miserable. And it cuts to them like loading up the helicopter with like ammunition and stuff, and she gets taught how to fly. That resumes, and it's like, okay, we're planning on leaving again. We can't just stay here forever. They realize that they can't just live in a bubble. So that makes his choice after the fact to then defend what he built even more kind of bittersweet, because he'd already kind of accepted that he had to move on, but he still couldn't live with the fact that these people were coming in and taking what was his.
Yeah.
So I think that's a big thing. So.
And speaking of the TV real quick, I like the way they utilized it in this movie. Like we talked about how in Night, they had the, constantly going to like the news report, and it felt very much of its time. And this felt very much, of the, late 1970s, where you're starting to get into that kind of like political arguing, kind of like news broadcast kind of thing. Like every time they cut to the TV, you have those like, two pundits kind of yelling at each other, and it's like a nice
you get the scientist with the eye patch who basically, as the movie goes on, just suggests more and more extreme action, to the point where he's suggesting to just nuke the big cities towards the end. And I think what that made that work really well is it basically shows how the rest of the world's breaking down around them. Like, they're in their bubble and they're kind of safe in this mall, but outside this is what's going on, and we see the entire, like, there's a guy on TV suggesting to nuke the major cities in the US. What I think is funny though is the characters do mention that they're trying to like go to Canada, and I'm like, is this just a US problem? Like, is it? They never actually say. Maybe the same day. Maybe in Day of the Dead we'll get like a little comment that implies if the rest of the world's already screwed as well. But that's an interesting idea, especially since it's not like Canada's like got water between it and the US. Like, surely the zombies can just over the line. Like, Border Patrol's not that much. Maybe this universe has a wall.
Maybe.
Everyone saw about a wall for Mexico. wall for the north.
Yeah. That'd be kind of interesting though, because I don't know if, at least off the top of my head, I can't really think of too many zombie movies that like take a big global approach to it. Most of them always feel very like localized in very specific spots. Yeah,
World War Z obviously sticks out in my head as that goes globe trotting a bit. Actually, my final point on that TV thing, beyond it climaxes, the last time we get one of the segments where he's like on TV, it's actually as he's saying, we should just nuke everywhere. That's when Roger zombifies finally. That's when he's like sitting up in the bed. It's like they're watching that in the other room as he's sitting up in the bed. It's a great sequence, and it's almost like with his death, the entirety of civilizations went with him. It's just a nice thematic little link that just makes it feel like that's just climaxed at the same time, and the whole movie's very tightly structured, which is probably why the extended cut feels like the pacing's a bit too lax. Like, clearly he took out what he thought he needed to take out to make the pacing tight, and
I do like that. A couple of people do get bit in this movie, and obviously, at this point there hadn't been a ton of zombie movies, so it's not really like, much cliches at this point. But I do like that no one did that thing where they're trying to hide it, or they're like, everyone like is aware of what's gonna happen, in the situation.
Yeah, it's like Roger basically realizes that it was kind of his fault, and he decides to help for as long as he can.
Yeah.
And he just asked for him to shoot him, make sure I don't turn into one of those things. He just asks for that, and then that's it. So it's a very simple scene. It's actually kind of amazing that in what is not the first zombie movie, but this would have been the first zombie movie that we could have had that cliche. And you wouldn't have blamed it for it because it's, you know, kind of the first time it would have happened, I think. But he, like, the fact that Romero didn't do that, and it's something that almost every single other zombie movie decides to do now. And it's not always bad, of course. Like, sometimes it's handled very well. But nah, you're right. No, they don't do that, which is interesting.
If we're talking about, like, you know, specific scenes that stand out to us.
Go on, shoot.
So, and it's kind of funny because I feel like each movie has this kind of thing. Like, when I think of Night of the Living Dead, you know, the first thing that always pops up to me is, you know, the arms like breaking through the, you know, boards.
Which does happen again in this at the start when the SWAT team's going through the building.
But the scene that always sticks out in my head for Dawn has got to be the elevator. Just those doors opening and then just the people rushing in.
Yeah. I don't know what my sort of number one. Honestly, the zombie that always pops out in my head is the helicopter one who gets his head.
That's
off.
great.
That one always sticks in my head. That scene's also notable because the other zombie who, like, the bald one, is actually the one from the poster who walks into the little the little store. That's the one from the poster. So I always like seeing him. He actually looks really good because he's got part of his face like lopped off. So he looks more like what I'd think of when I think of a zombie, as opposed to just this kind of bluish paint that some of them have got on. That's also a scene, by the way, in which Ken Foree, the actor, had to shoot 2 kids. I mean, they're zombies, but he has to mow down 2 kids in that scene. That's hardcore.
I love him so much. He's such a badass.
Oh, he's great. Yeah.
Did we just do another movie he was in recently?
I don't think so.
Am I wrong? All right. Think of someone else.
Do you know the weirdest thing, actually, the first time I ever watched this when I was a teenager, is there was like a moment of realization like halfway through when I went, holy shit, that's Keenan's dad from Keenan and Kel. Because in that, he's just this goofy dad who, you know, wears glasses and he's just kind of always is, like, kind of annoyed at his kids, like, and it's like, holy shit, he's shooting zombies and popping one-liners and all sorts of things. I like how practical he is. He's very strategic. He's the one who's kind of driving he's very smart. When he sees other people doing the wrong things, like, he's very quick to, like, sort things out and keep things going. Another small thing with the characters that I really appreciate is there is a little bit of, like, sexism addressed in the movie. Like, after the first time, like, it's just Peter and Roger at first that go out and they get supplies, but then eventually Steven also sort of traipses out. He almost gets killed by the zombie. There's that scene where he's got one bullet and he's just clicking through the chambers until he fires it, and he does eventually get the headshot. But he ends up going out and he ends up working with them to get stuff back, and it's almost exciting. They're almost enjoying it because it's like a thrill. And meantime, there's this bald zombie who gets into the stairway and gets up to Francine, and she's under attack, and she's like climbing out the window, and they save her, obviously. They come in and they deal with it, but afterwards she's like sitting on her own in the dark. She's kind of broken by this experience, and the 3 guys are in the other sort of room talking about what to do. Should we stay here? We should try do this. We should try do that. Excluding her from the conversation. And they also bring up, Steven specifically brings up that she's pregnant, and they're like, and Peter even offers, like, you know, do you want rid of it? Like, I know how to do that. How does he know how to do it? That's a good question. Like, how medical speaking is he talking here, or is he just talking about a good swift kick to the gut? Like, what? I
don't know.
What exactly is he meaning by that? I'm not sure. But so they bring this up, and, like, now the funny thing is that we see Steven's response to that, where he just kind of, like, puts his head down, and it's kind of like a no, but he doesn't say it though. But she's in another room, she can hear it, and she doesn't hear a no, because obviously if he just shakes his head, she can't hear that. And he goes into the room afterwards, and she brings up what they were just talking about. It's like, oh, do you want a burger? Like, she's pissed at him. It's like, well, do you? It's just this awkward thing. It's kind of basically what they're asking each other there is there a future for the world? Because if there's no future, we really shouldn't bring a kid into it.
Yeah.
That's kind of what I was getting from that. But when I talk about, like, the sexism coming up, it's the following scene when it's the next morning, they've been up on the roof, like, planning things. They come back down, and she cracks a joke about, oh, I made coffee and breakfast for you. But then she, like, goes on to say, look, I'm not going to be your hen mother in here. I'm not going to be the woman doing all the cooking and stuff while you three are doing stuff. There's four of us. I'm going to be involved in the plans. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. And do not treat me different because I'm pregnant. Like she puts it all out in the line. And my favourite thing about that is, one, it's addressing, again, this idea that you've got a microcosm, kind of like in the first, night, where you had this racial tension between two of the characters. There's only like 4 or 5 characters, but there's this racial tension between them. Here you're addressing sexism, and Peter immediately just goes, fair enough. And that's it. Like, it just, yeah, we don't have time for that bullshit. That's just, and but I like that it's brought up, that because there is almost this expectation that they'll go out and deal with the problems and she'll stay and be safe and do things. But obviously, when we get to the point where they're actually trying to kill all the zombies and they're chasing through, she's running around with a gun belt as well. Like, and she's learning to fly the helicopter. She's being useful in a lot of different ways. She's asserting herself, and she's being a proper part of the team, which is what she wanted. She didn't want to feel like she's this the housewife who's not going off in danger. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, and it's just a great example. We mentioned it a lot during Night, but Romero just really was ahead of his time. With these social issues and presenting very real strong characters, and just being able to really reflect these minority characters and female characters as being strong, independent.
That's another point. Yeah, we've got another black main character with Foree. So again, I don't think Day does have a black character, but I don't know if he's because I think Peter here and then Ben in the first movie, I think they're very definitely they're kind of the main one.
Yeah.
Right. Whereas in Day it's a bit more murky, but but all of them have this sort of black guy and female kind of dynamic going for them. Well, this one's a bit more even in the sense that you kind of feel like all 4 of them. Like, it's really an ensemble with the 4 of them, but again, it's definitely a factor here where it's maybe it wasn't as shocking in 78 as it was in 68. It'd been 10 years obviously, but it is still something he's driving forward. It's still something that's there. So no. Dawn is fantastic. Obviously, there's a lot of fun little things. One of my favourite little moments it's when Roger and Peter are starting to enjoy themselves when they're running around in the department store, and Roger decides to slide down the middle of the escalators.
Oh yeah.
And ever since I've seen that, I've been like, I want to do that. I really want to slide down that middle bit of the escalators. Now, you couldn't do it in all of them. Some of them have little bumpy bits, with signs on them and stuff. You couldn't do it in all of them, but
yeah,
I do fancy it. I fancy it.
Yeah.
Why don't you just find a big slide? Because they're meant for sliding. The thrill of this is that this is not meant for sliding, but I can do it anyway.
Yeah, there's a weird level of wish fulfillment in this that you don't really see in a lot of other horror movies. Mostly horror movies are all about trying to come to, or facing some type of, I don't know, evil or fear or something.
Yeah,
that's
if you're facing a fear, inner demon, that kind of thing. Yeah.
And then this is one of the a rare example where it's kind of no, they're doing stuff I want to do. This actually kind of looks fun.
It's just it's wish fulfillment, but it's also a case of be careful what you wish for. In fact, obviously, to ultimately wrap up the commercialism and again, much like the first movie, using the zombies as a metaphor for something, ultimately our heroes get away, or 2 of them do. They get away, they decide, no, we can't just stay in the bubble. And that's what, as all the zombies are getting back into the mall like they wanted. It's almost like the zombies, much like the people were fighting for the same thing, but the living people, the people who are alive, the people who have a future, are the ones who realise to give it up. And the zombies, the brainless, undead, just, monotonous, walking around idiots, are the ones who keep a hold of them all. They're the ones who still want to be there. Smarter people realise, human beings realise you have to go and do other things, but it's the mindless automaton zombies that still want them all.
They're they can't give up the past or their desire or greed or whatever they're
dead as a result.
Yeah.
Exactly. So no, fantastic film. I think the pacing, again, for being a 2-hour plus horror movie, the pacing is excellent. It has good character dynamics. The relationship between all 4 characters is very interesting. I don't think there's a single pairing between the 4. If you match different pairs where the dynamic's not at least interesting to a point. It was Flyboy and Peter having that tension at first, but then growing closer. Francine with everyone has this different relationship. And it's really interesting at the end where they do get away, and it's kind of like it's that pair that survived. It's not like, you know, it wasn't not husband and wife because they're not married, but it wasn't the couple that survived.
like the couple or
You know, it wasn't the two comrades. It's the two people who didn't know each other at the start that ended up surviving together. And the funny thing is I think looking at the movie and looking at their attitudes, those are the two who typically spoke the most sense. Like Peter's the one who constantly realized what was dangerous, even though he did want to stay in the mall. And Francine was the one, no, we can't just stay here forever. We have to keep moving. Like, it's almost like they had at least part of the right mindset from the word get go, and because of that, they're the ones who ultimately survived. But maybe I'm just going too much at that point. I don't know, but
no, I definitely get what you're saying. Yeah, it's a good point. And then and like you said, I like I mentioned a little earlier, like the ending is kind of like oddly hopeful, and even tying it in with like the titles, like Dawn, it's kind of as horrific as the movie itself is, Dawn, it's kind of like the promise of a new day. It's kind of like it's a little hopeful, like, oh, hey, what's to come.
Yeah, which I think is maybe partly why I don't like to think of these three movies as being the same universe, because I feel like having Day of the Dead kind of almost shits on the hopeful ending of Dawn. So it's just nice to kind of think about it as its own thing. And maybe these characters do get out okay, and there is like a hopeful chance of survival. Not that you need to know that they survive. That's kind of the point, is you don't know. Like, it's completely open-ended in that sense. But but no, it's delightful. Classic. It's a classic for a goddamn reason. It's a classic because it basically sets in stone a lot of the ideas of what a zombie is. It's full of the satire, full of the social commentary. It's full of just a fun concept where it's like, whereas the first movie's a great horror movie concept where it's creepy and you're trying to survive in a house as they're coming for you. This is the fun of having a fort and having your own little secret passages and planning against the attack and having the foresight to do so. So.
Yeah, like Night feels very much like a this is how you survive, while Dawn feels like this is how you live.
That's a very good way of putting it.
Yeah, thank you.
And I wonder if we watch Day and we'll see this is about how you die. This is how you die with honor. Is that what Day's about? I can't remember. It's been a while since I've seen it. Maybe we'll watch that and we'll see that kind of. But yeah, Night's about surviving, and Dawn's about. I'm going to rephrase it. It's about being worthy of surviving.
Oh, that's good. I like that. There you go.
There we go. Let's do some ratings, Timmy. I think we've wrapped that up nice and a nice neat bow. So I'm going to go first, Tim. I'm just going to give it to you first. 10 out of 10.
Okay. Now, if you remember, let's give a quick little preamble, and it's going to be spoilers for our Night review. If you remember what my score at the end of that was, is I gave it a 9.5, and the only reason why I gave Night a 9.5 was because I also think Dawn is a 10 out of 10, and that's like if I'm comparing the two, I love them both, but Dawn just like squeaks by just a little bit for me. It's amazing. It's I one of the movies, like, it's I'm probably watching it at least once a year. It's usually like sometime in October I'll like to rewatch it, but it's great. It's like, this is gotta be like the best zombie movie ever made. It's amazing.
I think that sums it up. Yeah, I love Dawn. I can't say enough nice things about it. I have one visual complaint about the blood looking like shit, but that's like, ultimately that is the physical, just fancy thing on the cover. The actual meat to the potatoes is the characters, it's a story, it's a subtext, it's a setting, it's all these things and the story it tells. So there we go. That's Dawn of the Dead. We'll be back, not the next episode, but sometime next week with Day of the Dead. So thank you very much for watching. Let us know what you think of Dawn of the Dead in the comments below. Like, subscribe, all that stuff. Helps us out a lot. Get us on Twitter at mailed_fuzz for channel updates. If you want to support the channel, head over to patreon.com/mailedfuzztv. You can support us over there and maybe get some bonuses, build us towards some other goals to get some more content. But that is us. So once again, thank you very much for watching, guys. Keep watching scary movies. And when there's no more room in hell, the dead will walk the earth.